HOA Karen tries to kick me out, didn't know I own her house. Emma had always dreamed of owning her own home. And when she finally moved into her new house in a quiet suburban neighborhood, she was excited for the peaceful life she'd envisioned. At first, everything seemed fine, the neighbors were friendly. The streets were well kept. And the general pace of life felt calm. But it didn't take long before Emma started noticing little things. The neighbors would give her sideways glances whenever she ventured out for a walk or parked her car in front of her house. Then, the letters started arriving. The first was a note about the grass in her yard not being trimmed according to community standards. Emma thought it was an honest mistake. She trimmed the lawn and moved on. But the complaints kept coming. Each more ridiculous than the last. Her trash bins were placed a foot too far from the curb. The porch light was too bright. And even the way her flowers were arranged in the garden was scrutinized. The source of these complaints was always the same, Karen, the HOA president. Emma hadn't paid much attention to Karen at first, she was just another neighbor in a leadership position. Or so it seemed. But Emma soon realized that Karen wasn't just any homeowner, she was determined to enforce the rules in the most nitpicky and overbearing ways. Despite trying to comply with every demand, the complaints never stopped. It felt as if Karen was watching her every move, eager to find fault. Emma started to wonder if this was what she could expect from living in this neighborhood. But little did she know, the true test was yet to come. One morning, as Emma was sipping her coffee, a letter arrived with the HOA logo stamped on the envelope. She sighed, expecting yet another petty complaint about her yard or some other trivial issue. But when she opened the letter, her heart skipped a beat. It was an official eviction notice. The letter, written in Karen's usual condescending tone, stated that Emma's property did not meet the community guidelines and aesthetic standards, listing an array of complaints that ranged from her garden being out of style to her house not matching the neighborhood's historical character. Emma stared at the paper in disbelief. She owned the house, how could they evict her? The letter didn't stop there. The HOA claimed that if Emma didn't vacate the property in 30 days, foreclosure proceedings would begin. Foreclosure. This wasn't just an eviction notice, it was an attempt to push her into financial ruin. Emma couldn't believe it. The HOA didn't have the legal power to evict her, let alone foreclose on her home. That's when the cold realization hit her, Karen wasn't just a neighbor or HOA president, she was Emma's tenant. Emma had bought the property as part of a real estate investment, and Karen had been renting it from her for years. Emma immediately checked her property records and confirmed what she had suspected. Karen had been living in a property she didn't own, and her lease was riddled with violations, including harassment of other residents, and unauthorized changes to the property. Like the obnoxious HOA signs she had posted in the yard, Emma felt a sense of satisfaction rise in her chest. Karen had no idea that the eviction notice she had sent was about to backfire in a way she never expected. Emma knew what she had to do next. That afternoon, Emma walked over to Karen's house, her mind racing with the potential showdown that was about to unfold. She had everything she needed: Karen's lease agreement, documentation of the violations, and the knowledge that she held all the cards. When she arrived, Karen was standing outside, as usual, nitpicking at a neighbor's garden. Emma approached with a calm, purposeful stride. Karen immediately turned, her eyes narrowing as she saw Emma walking toward her with a folder in hand. "I assume you got the notice," Karen said, her voice dripping with superiority, arms crossed in a defensive posture. "It's nothing personal, but the HOA has made its decision. You don't fit the community standards. And we can't have that. Emma's lips curled into a smile. But it wasn't one of submission, it was the smile of someone who had finally taken control. Oh. I got the notice, Emma said. Her voice steady. And I have a response. She reached into the folder and pulled out the official termination of lease agreement. Karen's smug expression faltered as she took the papers from Emma's hand. Her eyes skimmed the words. But Emma could see the moment when the realization hit her. The blood drained from Karen's face. This is a joke. Right? Karen stammered. Her voice losing its usual confidence. No joke, Emma said. A sharp edge in her voice. You see? Karen? The house you're renting from. It belongs to me. You sent me an eviction notice for a property I own. And yet you've been living in a property I can evict you from this entire time. Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Her mind scrambling for some defense. Why you can't do this, she whispered. Her voice trembling now. You don't have the authority. Emma took a step closer. Her gaze unwavering. Oh. But I do, she said calmly. Savoring the moment. You've been violating the terms of your lease for years, harassment. Unauthorized alterations to the property. Interference with legal property ownership. You've broken multiple clauses. You're out. Karen? It's time for you to step down from your little HOA throne. Or step out of my house. Either way. Your reign is over. Karen stood frozen. Her jaw clenched so tightly that Emma thought she might crack a tooth. The anger was bubbling just beneath the surface. But Karen couldn't find any way to fight back. No legal loopholes. No tricks. No angle she could twist to get out of this. The power had shifted completely. And Emma was no longer the one under Karen's thumb. Without waiting for a response, Emma turned and walked away, leaving Karen standing there, holding her own eviction notice. Emma's footsteps echoed in the street, as she left the confrontation behind. But she knew it was far from over. Karen had just started scrambling. And Emma was more than ready to see how this would unfold. The very next morning, Emma's inbox pinged with a new email. She didn't need to open it to know who it was from. The subject line read, Illegal eviction notice, violation of HOA bylaws. Emma rolled her eyes. Already prepared for the nonsense Karen had likely cooked up to protect herself, she opened the email. And there it was, another legal-sounding letter. This time from the HOA's compliance team. The email claimed that Emma's actions were a direct violation of HOA rules. Particularly the prohibition against retaliatory actions and unlawful displacement of residents. According to the email, the HOA had strict rules against eviction without due process. And if Emma didn't stop her unlawful eviction proceedings, the HOA would take legal action against her. Emma couldn't help but laugh. This was rich. Karen? The woman who had spent years pushing everyone around, was now using the HOA as a shield to avoid the consequences of her own actions. The HOA was clearly trying to protect its overbearing president. But Emma wasn't about to let this slide. She knew that HOA rules didn't trump state landlord-tenant laws. And she was ready to fight back. With a sigh, Emma composed a calm but firm response. She made sure to include all the legal points, carefully outlining that the HOA had no jurisdiction over landlord-tenant matters. Subject, illegal eviction notice, violation of HOA bylaws. Dear HOA compliance team, thank you for your message. I appreciate your concern regarding the recent eviction proceedings. However, Karen is not a resident of the community in the sense you describe. She is, in fact, my tenant. And as the legal owner of the property she occupies, I have the right to terminate her lease for cause, which I have already done in full compliance with state and federal housing laws. My decision to move forward with the eviction is not subject to HOA oversight or influence. Furthermore, any interference by the HOA in this lawful landlord-tenant matter could be considered harassment. And I am prepared to take legal action should this behavior continue. Best regards. Emma, last name. Property owner. Emma hit send and leaned back in her chair, feeling a sense of satisfaction. Karen's attempt to use the HOA as a shield was nothing more than a last-ditch effort to avoid facing the consequences of her actions. Emma wasn't intimidated. The law was on her side. And she was going to make sure everyone knew it. She closed her laptop, feeling confident that the HOA would back down. But Emma couldn't shake the feeling that Karen was just getting started with her attempts to sabotage the process. Let the games continue. Eviction day finally arrived. And Emma stood outside her house, watching as the final moments of this long, drawn-out battle approached. The 30-day notice had come and gone. And Karen had done everything she could to delay the inevitable. First, she tried to file a bogus harassment claim against Emma, claiming that Emma was threatening her and causing undue stress. But when Emma showed the police all the documentation, Karen's lease violations, the termination notice, the court order, the harassment claim was quickly dismissed. Then, Karen tried to rally support from the HOA, hoping they could intervene. But the HOA had already made it clear they had no authority over landlord-tenant matters. And they were silent on the issue, leaving Karen alone to fight this battle on her own. With nowhere else to turn, Karen resorted to desperate tactics, trying to manipulate the situation, playing the victim, and stirring up drama in the neighborhood. But none of it worked. The sheriff's department was on their way. And Emma knew it was time for Karen to face the consequences of her actions. The sheriff's officers arrived precisely on time. 2 uniformed officers stepped out of their car, clipboard in hand, ready to execute the court-ordered eviction. Emma stood across the street, arms crossed, watching as Karen opened the door. The moment Karen saw the officers, her face twisted with outrage. "This is my home," she screamed. "You can't just," but the officer was firm, cutting her off before she could finish her sentence. "Ma'am," the officer began, his voice calm but authoritative, "we are here to execute a court-ordered eviction. You have 15 minutes to vacate the premises. Any remaining belongings will be removed by a locksmith and clean-up crew." Karen's face turned beet red, her voice rising in protest. "You can't do this," she shouted, backing away from the door. "This is my home. You can't just kick me out." The officer didn't flinch. "No, ma'am. This is her home?" He pointed at Emma, who stood a few steps behind the officers, watching the scene unfold with a mix of satisfaction and patience. "You were given 30 days notice and multiple legal warnings. You are now trespassing on private property. If you don't comply, we will have no choice but to place you under arrest." The officer's words hit Karen like a slap to the face. For a moment, Emma thought she might break down in defeat. But instead, Karen's fury flared up once again. "You don't have to do this. We can work something out," she pleaded, her voice desperate. "I'll drop the complaints. I'll stop causing trouble. Just please, don't make me leave." Emma raised an eyebrow. Unimpressed. Now you want to negotiate? After everything you've put me through? After trying to have me evicted from my own home and dragging me into all this nonsense? She shook her head, her voice steady. No. Karen? You made your bed. Now you get to lie in it. Karen's expression crumbled. The rage quickly replaced by shock and disbelief. She stomped back inside her house, likely to throw one last tantrum before the inevitable. Emma could hear the sounds of furniture being overturned, objects crashing to the ground, and Karen screaming obscenities as she wrecked the interior. It was like watching a child throw a tantrum, except this time the tantrum had serious consequences. The officers moved quickly. One of them shouted, "Ma'am, step away from the property," as they advanced toward the house. It wasn't long before the sounds of Karen's destruction came to an abrupt halt, and she emerged from the house, dragging a suitcase behind her. Her face was red with humiliation, her steps heavy as she trudged down the front steps. She opened her mouth as if to say something, one last insult, one last pathetic attempt to salvage some dignity, but nothing came out. She couldn't find the words. Instead, she just glared at Emma, then turned and stormed to her car, throwing her suitcase into the trunk. Without another word, Karen sped off, leaving behind the wreckage of her own making. As the officers locked the door and Emma signed off on the final paperwork, a sense of peace washed over her. It was over. Karen, the self-appointed queen of the HOA, was finally gone. No more complaints. No more threats. No more power struggles. The neighborhood was calm once again. Emma stood on her front porch, watching as the last remnants of Karen's chaos disappeared into the distance. The silence was sweet. The victory even sweeter. Emma had fought back, and she had won. With Karen finally gone, the air felt lighter. Emma walked through her house, taking in the quiet. No more petty complaints about her lawn. No more late-night calls from neighbors in distress over Karen's rule. No more feeling like she was constantly being watched and judged by an overbearing HOA president. The peace was almost surreal after the chaos Karen had created. For the first time since moving in, Emma truly felt at home. The neighborhood, once stifled by Karen's reign, now seemed to breathe again. Neighbors smiled and waved as they passed by, and Emma even noticed a few of them had started to fix up their own homes without fear of harassment. It was a shift she hadn't realized she was craving until it was finally here. Then, the email arrived. Emma's phone buzzed with a new message from the HOA. The subject line read, "Invitation to join the HOA board." Emma chuckled under her breath as she opened the message. Apparently, the HOA was now looking for new leadership. With Karen gone, there was an open seat on the board, and they were inviting Emma to apply, citing her role as a valued member of the community. The audacity was almost impressive. After everything Karen had put her through, after all the lies, threats, and abuse of power, they wanted Emma to step in and join their ranks. The same HOA that had blindly backed Karen's every move now thought she would just fall in line. Emma smiled, shaking her head. There was no way she was going to join that corrupt board. She didn't need the power or the politics. What she had was far more valuable: control over her own life, her home, and the peace she had fought so hard to restore. She drafted a quick reply, her tone polite but firm. Subject, invitation to join the HOA board. Dear HOA board, Thank you for the invitation to apply for a position on the HOA board. However, after careful consideration, I must respectfully decline. I am content with my role in the neighborhood as a homeowner, and I do not wish to become involved in the politics of the HOA. I wish you the best in your search for new leadership. But rest assured, I will be taking no part in the board's activities. Best regards, Emma, last name, homeowner. With that, she hit send and set her phone down. Emma knew there would always be people like Karen. People who tried to impose their will on others for personal gain. But she also knew that standing up to them was the only way to bring about change. She had fought for her peace. And now, she had it. As Emma walked outside, breathing in the fresh air, she couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. Karen was gone. The HOA had been exposed for what it was. And Emma had come out on top. The neighborhood was finally free. And that, she thought, was victory enough. Thank you all for following along with this intense story. Emma came out victorious. And Karen finally faced the consequences of her actions. It's a story about power, justice, and the strength of standing your ground. If you enjoyed this story, feel free to share your thoughts in the comments below. If you like stories like this, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss another exciting story. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next video.